everybody. Welcome to the Using Work Sampling Data to Plan Appropriate Curriculum Instruction webinar. My name is Dr. Melissa Shamblott, and this is a Pearson webinar. Today we're going to talk about some important topics related to using data from work sampling to plan developmentally appropriate curriculum and instruction to meet the needs of the children and to satisfy program goals. We'll spend some time looking at a PowerPoint, and then we'll also move into the work sampling online system to review the steps for generating work sampling data reports, and also spending some time to learn how to use the data reports to plan for children's learning. Please ask questions in the chat box, and we will respond to them during the presentation as well as afterwards. We look forward to sharing this information with you and appreciate your taking the time to participate with us today. Many of you have been involved implementing work sampling system from the beginning of your school year, and many of you for several years. And so you're somewhat familiar with both the work sampling online system, the implementation of the work sampling system, and also using curriculum embedded assessment. In this workshop, we're going to talk a little bit about how we think about developmentally appropriate practices and the use of data for planning. We'll think about how the National Association for the Education of Young Children defines developmentally appropriate practices with an interest and attention to the age appropriateness, the individual appropriateness, and the cultural appropriateness of the activities that we plan. We'll also have a chance to think about how we can use our data to teach and plan for the whole child. It's important as we think about using our data to think about the meaningful content and learning topics that are reflected in each child and family's life. We'll take a look at the data and think about how can we individualize the experience for each child. We'll also talk a little bit about using a variety of approaches and strategies to support children. Our curriculum and instruction should be flexible and open to the different ways that children show us what they know and can do. It's important, too, that we're open to the idea of planning along the way as our data reveals new interests, topics, skills, and areas that we want to spend time with each child. When we think about the assessment cycle, for most of the implementation, we're asking questions from the developmental guidelines and checklists. We work hard as educators to collect evidence in the way of observation notes, work samples, different types of skill matrices might be used. We might be taking videos and photos and all that good information that we collect up as evidence to support what children are doing during our everyday classroom experiences. In this workshop, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the interpreting evidence and the taking action steps, because this is where we really begin to think about how can we use our data to plan for children's learning. When we think about these two steps in the assessment cycle, we have the interpret evidence, which would include reviewing all the data and evidence that we've collected throughout the collection period. We may go back to what we've collected in the fall, but usually when we enter into the second collection period, we're a little bit more focused on what the child is doing at this particular point in time. We can also use the information to determine what does this mean for each child. What is it telling us about their learning, their growth, their development, and how can we use the information to plan appropriate instruction. We can also use our data to look for patterns and trends in terms of each child's individual development and growth, but also patterns and trends in terms of what small groups or the entire group of children or groups of children are doing. The second part, the taking action, allows us to use the data after we've looked it over, made some sense of it, interpret our evidence. We can begin the process of planning for children's learning. It also allows us to share information with families and to select and identify focal areas for the next collection period or the next weeks to come. It also provides us with excellent information for setting goals based on our data, that idea of data-driven instruction and the goals that result from that. It also gives us an opportunity to embed the learning throughout the environment. One of the key things we can do as early childhood educators is take a look at the information that we're collecting and think about what it's telling us in terms of children's interests and areas of challenge and areas of success. It can also tell us a lot about our own early learning environment and help us to see areas where we may need to do more embedding of different kinds of materials or opportunities for children to learn. So we think about these two steps, the interpreting evidence and taking action, as we begin to plan curriculum for young children based on work sampling data. When we use our collected evidence and data to plan for children's learning, we're really satisfying what the National Association for the Education of Young Children has outlined in terms of appropriate instruction. We're giving some thought to what's appropriate for children based on their age and stage of development, and also looking carefully in terms of what it means for each child in terms of their interests, their background, as well as their sociocultural factors that can impact their learning as well as how they demonstrate what they know and can do. We're going to take a look now at some different types of data as part of our collected evidence and talk a little bit about how we can use each source of data for planning children's learning. Then we'll move in to look at these features in the online system. The first is something that would be pretty common to most of you, the observation notes that we work hard to take. Here we can see in just a simple notation that Elle stacked blocks and counted to 10. When asked how tall she was planning to build, she said, "To the moon." So this is just a basic notation that we might take, considered a brief note in the language of data or evidence collection. And we can see just from this one simple observation, there's lots of things we can do in terms of planning based on what this child is showing us. We might help the child to practice counting using one-to-one correspondence, knowing that she's interested in objects and counting together. We might also begin to introduce the child to numbers 15 and then 20. We can see that she can count to 10, and we can take her to the next level in terms of scaffolding the learning experience for her. We might also think about how we could provide materials for the child to draw and record her work. Maybe after building with the blocks, the child would be interested in sitting with a piece of paper and pencil and sketching out the work, maybe bringing it to the next level, adding more details, which then might in turn have the child go back and do some more with the block building, reflecting what they've drawn. We could also introduce the child to non-standard and standard measuring tools. The child's interested in building and is talking about building up to the moon, so we might want to introduce measuring sticks or tape measures or other standard and non-standard units of measure. Unifix cubes could be used, or sometimes even children will just use their hands or their arms to do measuring. And since the child has mentioned building to the moon, we might want to just have some fun talking with the child using some of our scientific thinking questions and ask them how far do they think the moon is, and maybe even read some books about the distance to the moon. So this is just an example of how we can use an observation note to plan curriculum and instruction for children. Another common thing in an early childhood implementation with work sampling is the collection of work samples, and often we have photographs that we've taken to reflect what children are doing. Here in this picture, we can see a child named Joey who has created a pattern out of Unifix blocks, red, yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow, and then gone over to the art area and recreated a pattern using different shapes. At the bottom, the child has shared with the teacher that it's red, yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow in the pattern, and the teacher has jotted that down below. So this is something that we would find in many early childhood environments, work samples as well as photos, and so we can use this too to plan instruction for children. This child's name